and give you all the information you need. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello folks, can you hear me all right? Then tell me to shut up. Janet's got me a little speech I can give up. I got a minute or so. That's it. All right. Anyway, we've been around Highland cattle a long time. But before we had the Highland cattle, we had dairy cattle. My dad did. And we've taken cattle all over the country. My dad started showing cattle. I was born in 1953. My dad started going to local fairs in 1954 with Ashar cattle. But before we went to the fairs, we had to teach them all how to lead. I was the youngest one at the time. So, and I weren't big enough to lead a cow, to teach them to lead before they went to the fair. So I got to lead Fido, the dog. So I had to teach them to lead too. But anyways, we've been doing this a long time. I grew up, we got the Highlands in 1966, and my dad fell in love with them. And every place he went, they fell in love with the Highland cattle. He used to go to the Danbury Fair, maybe not to stop at this, but the number of years they went to the Danbury Fair in Danbury, Connecticut, it ended in 1978. The average gate at that fair was 250,000 people a year. And then if that changed, it went to Rochester, New Hampshire, and I don't know the tape of how many went through the gate there. But my dad put cattle in front, Highland cattle in front of millions and millions of people. And he showed all over New England, took them to shows, fairs. He'd start out going to fairs in July. He'd end up at Freiburg, Maine in October to the last fair. And almost every week, he had Highland cattle in front of somebody. Janet and I have continued this. And my dad would be pretty proud today to see the people here with Highland cattle. Thank you for coming, everybody. I think my time is up, right? And, oh, this is my wife, Janet. She's a retired school teacher. She taught first grade for 30 years. And I'm still in first grade, and I hope you're going to graduate. Thank you.
Understand. I was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So I'm a Southern belle, a ding-a-ling, like, that's what my late husband used to call me. He was from Maine. So I was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I didn't live there very long. My parents moved to New York. I grew up on Long Island. I lived in Boston. I lived in Maine. And then I moved to Vermont. I don't know that I'd ever seen a cow. I've certainly never.
Mic closer, speak up, please.
I don't know that I've ever seen a cow. I've certainly never touched a cow. When my late husband and I decided to move to Vermont, we looked at a house. We looked out on the deck, that's why I was making cry. We looked out on the deck at the most beautiful view that I've ever seen in my life. And I've traveled a lot of places. And those of you that have been to Vermont and seen our place, it is spectacular. We looked out at the mountains, first the Green Mountains of Vermont and all the way across to New York to the Adirondacks. And right in the middle of that view, there was a big black and white creature with 4 legs and a little chain with a number around its neck. No, we are not going to buy this place. You can't have children where there are cows standing right on the edge of the lawn. This is not going to be a safe place to live. Bob looked at me and he said, that's a dairy cow. It's in a fence. It's not going to hurt us. We're going to buy this place. And maybe someday there'll be cows here. And there are. Ray brought 5 Highlands the first time. When Bob died, I was worried about keeping the land open. Ray said, I can help. I said, how? He said, you wait. Trailer pulled up with 5 Highland cows. He unloaded them, went back to his farm in Greensboro, and within an hour, they were out of the fence. I was terrified. Somehow, I got them back into the fence. I was hooked. We now have 70 Highland and Highland crosses. We built the herd up from his dad's 30 up to 170. We're going backwards. I know many of you are in the stage of building a larger herd. We need a smaller herd because we're selling the farm in Greensboro Bend and consolidating everything to Plainfield. So we now have about 70. I taught school for 30 years. I was Vermont Teacher of the Year. I only say that because Ray said he hasn't graduated from first grade yet, but he's doing quite well. I'm going to go backwards a little bit on the history of the farm. I know many of you have read the history already, and it's thanks to the Heartland. They're the 4-part history. I appreciate them asking us to write that about Chet Acres because I would never have written it down otherwise. And we now have that history for us and for other people to know about. When Ray's dad came to Ray in 2001 and told him the farm was in bankruptcy, Ray couldn't believe it. His dad had paid $5,000 for that farm in 1964, and now he was saying it was in bankruptcy. He said, you have to save the farm, and you have to save our Highlands. There's a truck on the way from Kansas City coming to pick up the Highlands, and they're evicting us from our house. So we scrambled, and we got a loan to pay off the bankruptcy note. That bankruptcy note was paid off in May of 2021, which was a big deal. It doesn't happen all that often, but we did. And Ray's dad asked Ray to promise that he would preserve the most ancient genetics of Highland cattle in the United States. And that's what we've done. We've taken a couple of ways to do it. We started off by selling a lot of beef because I said to Ray, the only way that we can sustain this herd is to sell beef. That's why we had to build the herd up to 170 because if you're selling beef, you've got to have animals to take to the slaughterhouse. And now we've pivoted to selling both beef and breeding stock. And probably a higher percentage right now of breeding stock over beef. But we still sell beef because Highlands are beef animals. And there is no beef like Highland beef. We just went to a blind taste test where in Vermont, they had 4 samples of grass-fed beef, all 100% grass-fed. It was a blind test. They passed out a plate and asked people to taste it and to share what they thought of that beef. The first plate that came, I picked it up and I took a whiff of it, and I thought I was going to throw up. And I tasted it, and it was not good. It left a waxy taste in my mouth. I said, this is not Highland beef. The second plate that came, I picked it up and I said, this is our beef. And they asked for comments about each of the samples. The Highland beef was the only sample that got positive comments. And these are words that you can use. They said complex flavor, melts in your mouth, no fatty aftertaste in your mouth. And we did the other 2 samples, and then at the end, the person who was doing the sensory training said, is there any farms here that provided some of this grass-fed beef? I raised my hand. He said, do you know which one is yours? I said, I do. It was number 2. And he said, are you sure? First, then I got nervous. This is the point where you lock in your answer. I said, I'm pretty sure that was our beef. So he went back through his crib sheet, and he said, that was Greenfield Highland beef. Correct. It was different than any other beef. They were all cooked the same. They were all cooked by a professional chef. They were all raised by good farmers who took good care of their animals, did a good job of processing. The Highland beef is different. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In this morning session, we're going to talk about how to grow the best beef that you can, and also how to share with people what is special about your beef. Our slaughterhouses do not allow cattle with horns over 28 inches. I know other places they can. It started out 36 inches, then it went to 30 inches and now it's 28 inches. And if you show up with an animal that has horns over 28 inches, they'll say goodbye, you're not coming in today. We had to pivot to figure out how to continue to sell beef, quality beef, with the Highlands, but we couldn't do it with pure Highlands. Ray did some research, and if you read the Highland Journal and read the magazine, he brought me home a Highland female and said it was my birthday present. I said, it's not my birthday, and I don't want a cow. He was right. That Highland, that shorthorn cow, Samantha, that he brought home, started us with the crossbreeding. In the beginning, we used a Highland bull and a shorthorn female. And then I realized we have all these Highland cows out here, and I don't want to buy a whole bunch more cows, so why don't we get a shorthorn bull and use it on our Highland mamas? For us, that has been a better cross. The bull is polled. He's a purebred, natural polled shorthorn. We get a half and half. Sometimes we keep the females, and we get a 3/4 shorthorn. They grow almost twice as fast. They go into the slaughterhouse, everybody's smiling, and the beef is exactly the same as the purebred Highland beef. The Highland beef is so heritable because it has not been genetically altered that when you cross it, particularly with a British Isle breed, you get the very same quality and the very same traits as Highland beef. When we did a study with Dr. Wiegand at the University of Missouri, it was with Highland beef. He asked me to send one of our crossbred samples. We have Highlands that we have to steer. We kill them on the farm. We do on-farm processing. We take those to a processing plant, but it's not USDA. I can't sell those by the package. Those are sold by the half and the quarter or the whole. In our market, most people want fresh beef in a nice vacuum sealed package so that they can walk into the store and say, this is what I'm going to have for supper. So the majority of our beef is USDA inspected in vacuum sealed. We don't have a lot of markets. When we started out selling beef, I would go to 15 different stores on the way to Teachable and leave 3 packages of beef there and 2 packages of beef here and maybe 5 there. That was unsustainable. We now have very few markets, but good markets. For us, in Vermont, we have co-ops. I don't know if you have those in a part of the country, and I know everybody has different markets where people are very educated about grass-fed. People do not want grain finished. That's our market. They're willing to pay a little extra for that. People who go to the co-ops, who come to the farmer's market, know that it's probably going to be more expensive but better and healthier than the tube you're going to get at Shaw's or wherever you have your grocery store. In Vermont, they also give coupons to people who have EBD cards so that they can spend those at the farmer's market. We feel great about trying to get our meat to everybody because we know it's healthy and we know it's good. We donate to the food pantry. We donate 20 pounds every other month. I look in the freezer, I see what I have enough of, what I've got extra, put up a box and give it, and they distribute it to Meals on Wheels, they distribute it to senior meals, and every year we get a printout of exactly how many pounds went to which place, and we get little thank you notes that say, thank you so much for donating that meat. Lots of people donate vegetables. Very few people donate protein. So if you have a system, if you have anything extra, if you have a bunch of short ribs or you have a couple of chuck roasts, see if you can find a place that people can use it and appreciate it. The other thing is you get it in their mouth and they're going to want to have more of it. So let's talk about getting it into their mouth. When we first started selling Highland beef, we tried to get a place at the farmer's market, and the market manager said, I'm sorry, we already have beef producers. We don't need another beef producer. I said, but this is different. This is Highland beef. We don't have a Highland beef. Can we try? They found a little space in a corner left over that wasn't even a market space. She said, go ahead. You can go right there. We went there. The first couple of years, we gave out a lot of beef. And again, whether you could do this or not, we could have a skillet and a hot plate and we could cook little bird burger balls at home, 5 pounds of them. Took them, Ray can't boil water, but he can cook burger balls. And he would roll them around the frying pan in butter, stick a toothpick in them, put them on the plate, they put them in their mouth and say, whoa, what was that? I said, that's Highland beef. Can we buy some? Sure. And they did. We took a bunch to restaurants. We don't sell to restaurants right now. We started selling to restaurants. Restaurants for us were an unreliable market. If you go and they say, can we pay you next week? You know it's going downhill. A lot of times people would put our beef on the menu and then they wouldn't buy it, plus our beef was still on the menu. And so people would come up and say, hey, I got your beef at McGillicuddy's. And I'd say, we don't sell to McGillicuddy's. And I'd have to talk to the restaurant about the fact that that was false advertising, and their waitresses needed to know that that wasn't Highland beef that they were serving. But we gave away a lot of steaks, a lot of high-end cuts, just so people could try it. In the co-op, I said, can I sign up to do a demo? They gave us a table. Everybody who walked through got a burger ball, or in the co-op we couldn't cook, so I cooked a head in a crock pot. I made some barbecue brisket. They got a little cup of barbecue beef. People wanted to buy it. They said to the managers, how come you don't have this beef? Oh, would you like to sell at the co-op? So we started selling at the co-op. So getting it in their mouth is critical. What I want you to do is on your paper, think about either what you have done to put beef into people's mouths, or what you might do in your setting to get that beef into their mouth. So take just a minute to write down 3 things that you either have done already or that you could do, and it's going to cost a little money because you're going to be giving away free samples and you get it back tenfold. So talk to people at your table, see what other people are doing.
Can't pause that.
Colorado did at least get a feedback on taste, whether they like it. I know I like it. He's brand new. Travis got friends. Have friends. Travis took the other guy.
All right. Is anybody willing at their table to share something that you do to get Highland beef into people's mouths?
We have a mixture.
Anybody?
We have thunder was 3/4 River, light was 3/4 River.
All right, you shared it at the table. Hopefully you've got some new ideas and some things that you can go away with and do. The next thing I'm going to ask you is on your paper to write down 3 things that make Highland beef special. Maybe it's something you share with your customers, maybe it's something that you post on a website, or something that you use for selling. So again, please write down 3 things that make Highland beef special. Talk to your neighbors, see if they have some different ideas.
you are type of both have.
That's what it's up to.
Now, we never let it go. Yeah, you know, and every Herbert began and they were genetic. And so every pole, no matter even if it's a pole, has the ability to grow organic. And so it's not completely eradicated. So yeah, 90% of what you get fancy natural.
All right, so I can pull that talk right into the microphone. I hope that's better. So on your paper at the top, you're going to write down those 3 things that you thought of, or you shared, or I shared about how to get meat into people's mouths. Down at the bottom, we're going to talk a little bit about what we say makes Highland beef special. When we're at the farmer's market and somebody comes up, and Ray will usually say, "Have you ever had Highland beef?" And he often says, "If you have any questions, ask her." So they say to me, "What makes Highland beef special?" My answer to them is, "How many days do you have?" And I'm really interested in that. One fellow said to me, "Please tell me the top 3 things." So I thought about, what can I tell people as the top 3 things? And I tell them it's easy as 1, 2, 3. Number 1 on your paper, it says it's what's outside. Does anybody have an idea what I'm going to share about what's outside that makes Highland beef different? Pardon? Double coat. Excellent. Okay, so we just had an answer to the double coat. What's outside is that double coat of hair and the thickness of the hide. Many of you have ever tanned a Highland hide and compared it to a Longhorn or any other breed. It's much, much thicker. It's what's outside that animal that makes the biggest difference. Other breeds of cattle put a layer of fat on the outside of their muscle to insulate them. In order to get fat to migrate into the muscle, you have to overfeed that animal so that its body knows it's insulated with a layer of fat, and then you have to give it more. And the only way that you can give it more is to give either grain or corn or some supplement. Because our beef is grass-fed, we need to have the best quality feed, best quality grass, best quality hay, but it's what's on the outside. So, because they don't put a layer of fat on the outside, that fat migrates directly into the muscle. I tell people that Highland cattle are the only breed of cattle that will marble on 100% grass or less supplement than other breeds have to have. When people come to the farm, I have a hide that they can run their fingers through. They can pick up that edge and see how thick it is. So it's what's on the outside that is number 1 that makes Highland beef different. Number 2 says we're not picky eaters. Anybody have an idea what that means about what makes Highland beef special?
Foragers.
Correct. They eat a variety of forage. Other breeds of cattle will walk out into that pasture and they say, I like that clover, that's yummy, but I don't eat weeds, and they turn their nose up. Pretty soon that pasture looks pretty crummy because the good stuff is all eaten down and the weeds are left behind. The Highlands will eat most anything. We're pretty sticklers about the fact that if somebody wants to buy Highlands to clear land, I'm not selling that to them. But they will eat a variety of forage. You are what you eat. They do need to have good feed, but it is that variety of feed that gives the complexity of flavor to the Highland beef. It's like a wine. You say, overtones of cherry or something like that. So it is that variety of feed. It's because they're not picky eaters. They haven't been genetically altered. They eat everything because that's what they had to do to survive. That's number 2. Number 3, show me your muscle. Any idea what that means? When we did the study with Dr. Wiegand, he was astounded because the Highland beef turned out to be tenderer than any of the commercial breeds he tested. I wanted to know why. The fibers in the Highland muscle are thinner, but there are more fibers per square inch. So it's like chewing a piece of angel hair pasta versus a piece of lasagna. Your mind measures tenderness by how many times you have to masticate that meat. Because of the thinner fibers, you do not have to chew as many times in order to swallow your meat or to feel like you are comfortable with the tenderness of the meat. So when I say, show me your muscle, the muscle is actually different than other breeds of cattle. I'll bet all of you say, it's tender, it's delicious, and somebody has probably said to you, prove it, or why. And you now know why. There are 3 empirical reasons that the Highland beef is not only different, but better. We've got just a few minutes before we switch over to how we grow our best beef and what you might be able to do to improve that a little bit there. I'm just going to put up a little bit of joy right here. We all know that Highlands bring us joy. So that's Shad or Cinnamon Bear.
Cinnamon bear, there's the cinnamon
We miss him every day. Bear was so gentle. He was a gentle giant. When he jumped off the ground on all 4 feet, he was lifting 2,200 pounds off of the ground. I never had seen an animal do that. He came up to water, and it was a new snow, and he was just like a kid playing in the snow. And I happened to be there, took a video of it, and every time I see it, I get the shivers because it just shows pure joy. And it also shows all of the things that make Highlands special to us. Long hair, long horns, docile personalities. All right. Any quick questions about beef marketing or what makes beef special? And you're going to have to yell, I guess, because I'm trying to hear.
What is the average weight of a purebred steer for you? I mean, like, what's the norm for a purebred versus a crossbred?
So our purebreds, we need to keep probably 28 months on 100% grass. And that's going to be about 550 to 600 pounds hanging weight. Our short run process, we can start to process at 16 months. The 16-month cross is going to be about 500 pounds. That cohort of that year, we're going to keep processing because we process all year round. By the time we're ready to process the next group, that shorthorn cross is going to be at 24 months, about 780 pounds. Hanging weight. Hanging weight. We can process almost a year sooner for us, where we have to feed stored forage for about 8 months of the year. It is life and death in terms of economy. Hay is our most expensive product, our most expensive thing on our spreadsheet, and if we can cut down on a year's worth of hay by doing the crossbred, we can afford to raise beef. Any other quick questions?
No.
Yes?
Is your corn-fed beef more tender and tastes better than just grass-fed?
We only raise grass-fed, so I can't answer that. Most of the people who buy our beef prefer the 100% grass-fed. Different parts of the country have different mindsets. I know that some people, because they have been told that grain-fed is the best beef, only want grain-fed. I think you would discover, as long as it's good quality feed, that the 100% grass-fed is going to be the same. When we did the studies with Dr. Regan, the lipid profiles were similar, and Gloria, you probably remember, they were similar. They were a little bit different with the grain-fed. There was no difference in the tenderness, absolutely none.
What is your main pasture and hay that you feed?
In Vermont, our main grass is orchard grass and whatever the native species are. We have never plowed a field and planted. It's what's there. We do have good soil. We're very fortunate we don't have clay where we are. There are places in Vermont that there is clay. I'm going to show you some pictures when we get into the grazing part of the quality of the grass. But when we started, we were taking fields that had not been cared for, and there wasn't a lot of grass. And so we enhanced the fields with manure, with wood ash. We have put some commercial fertilizer on fields that are too steep for us to spread the manure. And we do intensive cell grazing, which if you could wait just a second, that's what we're going to tell you. And regardless of your pasture, regardless of your soil, regardless of whether you're dealing with drought or anything else, intensive cell grazing will improve your pasture. We had somebody look at the farm in Greensboro when Ray and I first started, and she looked at it and she said, there's not a lot of feed here. She said, you've got some good species, but it's been overgrazed. Because Ray's dad never had time or money to take care of it the way we tried to do. And she said, if you start to do rotational grazing and intensive cell, you will change this with doing nothing else. And it does. And it's not just because we're in Vermont. I'll do a quick plug for Ranching for Profit. Ranching for Profit is a school that comes out of Texas, and you go in with no preconceived idea. They're not going to tell you what to do. You're going to work with a team, and you come out with something. And for us, it was changing over to that intensive cell grazing. And that's what changed our pastures. We can graze twice as many animals on the same acres just by doing that. Somebody else?
I have a question. What regulations do you have that might be different as far as raising your Highland up there in Vermont as opposed to some of the other states here in the West?
I don't know of any regulations in terms of raising them. I know there are different regulations at farmers market about being able to offer samples and being able to cook at the farmers market. We can do that. If you can't, you'd have to bring something that's already prepared. We have cooked steaks at home, sliced them thin, had them on a little plate, and people can try the steaks. We're not cooking there. That's the biggest thing that I would check about in terms of getting the food into their mouth. I'm not sure what you mean about raising.
Nothing from the government there, the state government that would impact your farm in Vermont.
Say that again?
Nothing that would impact your farm from the state government.
No. There is, in Vermont, we are not supposed to have cattle accessible to any surface water. That means wetlands, streams, ponds. So the state of Vermont offers money from the Agency of Agriculture to exclude the cattle from any surface water and put in an alternate source of water. So we put in frost-free waterers that all the cattle can get to. I know in different parts of the country you need to have the water for cattle to get into in terms of the climate and the temperature. But that is something in the state of Vermont, is they are working to be sure that no cattle touch surface water because of runoff. We're 40 miles from Lake Champlain. We are considered in the Lake Champlain basin, and so the current concern is that if they are entering, the effluent might go all the way to Lake Champlain. I don't think that's gonna happen, but that is something that Vermont is working very hard to do, is to be sure the lakes and streams are clean.
Just a comment or a question. This group right here involves a lot of the Midwest. And there are numerous different varieties of grass. With you being in a co-op, do you experience other farmers that have different kinds of grass than your orchard grass? We have fescue, we have people that have alfalfa, we have brome, and we understand that there is a vast difference in the quality of the beef.
There sure is. We visited a couple farms out here, and people doing a great job, but they don't have the grass that we have. They don't have the hay that we have. But with this intensive cell grazing, it will improve whatever species you have. You will see a marked difference. The big thing is not where the animals are. The big part is where they are not, where the grasses are resting. We'll talk about that. I understand it is very different. But there are some things that we do that will be applicable for anywhere in the country. As I said, this ranching for profit, most of the people that came to that program, it was housed in Vermont, but there were people all over the country that came. They were ranchers from the Midwest, and they had some of the same things that you're dealing with, and they all came up with some kind of a plan that was going to improve their bottom line. Yes?
Could you elaborate a little bit on, you seem to indicate that you think that the quality of the forage goes down as you put rotational grazing, put like the rotational grazing program, is that what you said?
We're going to talk about that next, a rotational grazing program. And that will improve whatever you have for your forage. Okay. So we'll start with, on your table, you have a little bag, and it has some grass in it. So if you look at your Ziploc bag, and if you don't have one, maybe you can share with somebody. In that bag, there's going to be a piece of grass that has more than one stem. I picked those up when I went to Larissa and Adams. I found a field on the way back to here that had some green grass. That's what I needed. I didn't want to bring some from home because I wanted it to be grass over here. If you look in that bag, you can open it up. There's one piece that has multiple stems, and in there there's a tiny piece that is probably about that tall. And I want you to look at, you can take them right out if you want. When you do your rotational grazing, and we'll talk about this, you need to leave in that pasture grass that looks like that piece that has multiple stems in it. When you overgraze, if you take that tiny piece and you think about standing that up and how much surface there is for the sun to touch, there's less than a pinpoint. You're not going to get regrowth. You need to have grass that folds over, so there is surface area for the sun to regrow. In your green packet, your tan packet, if you open to this page, you'll see a picture with some grasses on it. And it shows you the length of time that you need to regrow your pasture if you have one of those tiny pieces sticking up. And how long it takes to regrow if you have enough surface area of your grass to regrow. So, after I took the ranching for profit class, what I came out for my plan, and everybody in that whole room had a different plan, I came out with a plan to do this intensive cell grazing. Ray and I had probably the worst argument of our lives. Because I said, we're gonna create some really narrow little cells. And we need a lot of them. And he said it won't work with Highlands. You can't get a lot of Highlands in a small area. The competition won't work. They'll go through the fences. There's not gonna be enough feed in a small area for this huge group of animals. And I said, we're gonna try it. If it doesn't work, we won't do it. We got about 4,000 feet of speed fence, I don't know, 500 yellow insulators, a whole bunch of fiberglass posts, and we laid out long, narrow alleys. You need herd density. You need a lot of animals in that small space to make this work. With their hoofs, they're gonna let grass seed grow, they'll open up the soil. They're gonna spread their manure all along there. They're not gonna go in one place to poop. They're already spreading manure for you. And they're going to be in one area for maybe 2 or 3 days, depending on the climate and your grass and your herd density, and then they're gonna go into another cell. They can't go back into that cell for about 21 days. So if you figure it out, you're gonna need about 7 paddocks for every group of animals. We had a lot of groups. We had the calves here, we had the ones with the bull there, we had the young stock here. You want to have as few groups as possible. Because, remember, you need at least 7 cells for each group. So you want to figure out how you can have less groups, how you can clump your animals together. That doesn't mean you're going to put young stock in with your bull before they're ready to breed. You have to think about all those things. But there probably is a way that you can consolidate the number of groups that you have. The advantage to that cell grazing is numerous. One thing, people say, how do you move your cattle? How do you get them to come? I go outside and they are there instantly. They're talking to me instantly because they know they're going to go into a new cell with grass. When cattle first go into a new cell, they eat 30% of their body weight the first day. The second day, they eat 20%. The third day, they eat 15%. Regardless of what the grass is like. Even if they're full. It's kind of like us. Do you want dessert? Well, I'm really full, but can you show me the menu? When they go into a new paddock, they put their heads down and they eat. Even if they were just eating in the other paddock. So you're going to get increased growth, you're going to have healthier animals because they eat more the first day that they go in. They walk past me almost every day. I can look at calves, I can look at udders, I can look at feet, I can see who's doing good, I can see if someone's missing because I'm changing that pattern. You don't ever go more than 2 days without seeing that group of animals. Parasites. Parasites live in the bottom 3 inches of your grass and close to the soil. You're taking your animals out before they ever eat down 3 inches. So they're not even getting to the parasites. 21 days, the parasite life cycle is all over. By the time they get back into that first paddock, the parasite life cycle is gone. So we don't have any problem with parasites. And again, I know we're all in different parts of the country, but those are some of the advantages of that cell grazing. The grass, as I said, the important part is not where they are, it's where they're not. Because those paddocks that are resting are regrowing. We used to have maybe 2 or 3 pastures, and we called it rotational grazing, so they were in one pasture for a couple of weeks, and then we moved them to another. But by the time they came out of that pasture, that grass wasn't very tall. And you can see on your paper, it's not going to regrow. But now that we take them out of the paddock, when the grass is, the rule of thumb is you take them out when it's 3 inches tall, you don't put them back in until it's 6 inches tall. Because that's giving you those blades that are folded over to get the surface area. That's why, even though in the beginning it is labor intensive, and you might say, how am I ever going to build that many cells? In the beginning, it is a lot of work. Afterwards, it's almost no work. They're so happy to get in a new pasture. We run a single strand of electric fence. People who come to the farm say, that's your fence? Then we say the best fence is a full stomach. If they got their baby with them, if they got water, if they got shade, and they got plenty of food, we do fence train our calves. Once they're fence trained, they don't try to get out. I wouldn't say they never get out, but in general, they stay in even with that single strand. Let's see, what else haven't I told you about? Any questions so far about what I've said?
Yeah, I got a question. Is your cell fencing, is that permanent?
So we do set it up as what I would say is semi-permanent. It is fiberglass posts, it's speed fence. We can take it down, but we do leave those cells up. Some people who do rotational grazing actually pick up the fence and move the cattle to a new area, and that's fine. For us, we went ahead and made those cells, and they know exactly where they are, they're ready to move, and so I generally just move from this one to this one to this one to this one to this one, and then they're gonna come back around to that one. You can do it either way. We don't put in a lot of cedar posts, we probably put in a couple of cedar posts along there just for stability, but I would call it semi-permanent.
How often do you change the cows from one cell to the next?
Generally, every 2 days, every 3 days. That's going to depend on the time of year. It's going to depend on your rainfall. It's going to depend on how many animals you have in there. The biggest thing that you're watching for is making sure they don't graze down past 3 inches. And in order to do that, you're going to need at least 7 cells. During the fall, when the grass is growing slower, you might not be able to leave them in there for 3 days. You might have to move them every day, and you might need another cell.
You have water in every one of the cells?
Good question. That's what I forgot to talk about. So, we have a sacrifice area. And the sacrifice area is the area where they can get to water from every cell. So there's an alleyway at the top of every cell. There's a gate across. I open that gate. They're in the alleyway. They can get to the barn. They can get to water. They can get to shade. It's called the sacrifice area. Anybody have an idea why it's called the sacrifice area? Yeah, there's not going to be regrowth there because they're grazing that whenever they want. So we are sacrificing that section for quality feed so that they can get to water and shade. Some people have it where there's water in every paddock. That was more work than we could do. We would have to put lines in for everyone. The other thing is I like them to come to the barn every day. I want to see them coming out of that paddock every day and then back into that paddock.
What is the group, you said they're groups, you never have groups. What is your group of cattle? How many are you?
So we have 2 sets of cells. One of them is about 1 acre each, long, narrow, and the other about 2 acres each. In the 2 acre cell, we have about 30 cows, calves, and a bull. And they're in 2 acres of land. I'm sorry, what? Sorry, it's going to be about 30 in 2 acres. In the 1 acre section, those are going to be younger stock, and there's probably 14, 15 in there. They rotated about the same time frame as the other group, but it's a smaller area. Any other questions?
You may or may not want to add to it the dropping the wormer, the other benefit that it does in increasing the bugs that come back to your place.
Yeah. So we do use Cydectin. We try to do every animal twice a year. I won't say that we get every animal twice a year. We always do when we bring calves in for weaning, they get Cydectin. When we sell any animal, they get Cydectin. But we never have a problem with parasites because of that life cycle, and they're not in an area where they're picking up a parasite. Again, it's different in different parts of the country. We may not have some of the parasite issues that you have. It freezes a lot in Vermont. Not this year so much, but generally we get temperatures down 30 below 0. We probably aren't getting some of the parasites that will overwinter that you might have.
The point I was talking about that, so if you use a wormer, there's a specific bug that will come back, it's called dung beetle. If you stop the wormers altogether, Zydectin that isn't known to kill it as bad. Ivermectin for a 3-week period will kill every dung beetle on your farm. But if you can get the dung beetles to express, your cow hides will be gone in about 20 days, as opposed to taking months. So each time you put ivermectin in, you just set the soil back. So if you don't want the clumps, drop the ivermectin. Eventually, over time, dung beetles will come back, and the dung beetles will go in better than a chicken in terms of spreading and pulling that manure directly into the soil.
So I don't know if people in the back could hear, he was talking about that decreasing the amount of wormers that you use on the cattle will allow the dung beetles to come back in and do some of the natural work with that. Any, yes.
Are you cutting your own hay or are you buying all your hay?
Ray? Ray cuts all of our hay. He mows, he rakes, he bales, he hauls. Guess what I do? I push the lever on the wrapper. That's about as mechanical as I am. I can't drive a tractor. I'm not much help with any of the machinery, but he can't run the computer. We have very different skill sets. It works for us, but we do make all of our own hay, and Ray makes really good hay. This year, we had to buy 100 bales because I don't know if any of you heard that it flooded in Vermont, and we had a terrible, terrible hay season. We either couldn't get to fields because the roads were out, or the fields were wet almost the entire summer. I was astounded that we have a field that we've hayed for years, beautiful, beautiful grass. This summer, it came in with, this past summer, swale grass. I did not think a species could change that quickly from the water in the soil and the water on the roots. All of the good grasses were gone, and it came in as swale grass, which I don't know if you have that here. The cattle won't eat it. It's a thick, very coarse, where there's swamp. And so we did have to buy 100 bales of the round bales. We use about 750 4x4 or 4x5 round bales. We wrap our bales. I don't think you do that here. Most of our bales are silage, so they're wrapped when they are slightly moist. They break down in the silage. Remember this Long Island girl? I open a bale of hay and I say, oh, this smells so good. I mean, why would I ever think a bale of hay smells good? It smells so good. It's like candy to the animals. It's partially broken down. It's easy for them to digest. And we do make some dry bales because we put those in the ground bales. We put those in the barn. They come apart easily for calves and animals that are in the barn. But most of our bales are wrapped, and Davis and his dad were kind enough to push the lever a couple of times for me 2 summers ago. But that's the extent of the help I do. It is basically all that Ray does also.
One follow-up. Is that pasture that you hay grazed?
Good question. Some of it is. You know why? Because we're now producing so much grass in those cells that we have to hay some of those cells. We never did before. We don't hay our own land. Our hay is on other people's land. Again, in Vermont, people are so happy for us to come and cut their hay and keep their fields open. Here's what I pay them. If they're having company over, they'll say, can I get a couple packages of ground beef? We don't lease it. We just tell them they can have what they want for beef. But our own land is what we do the cell grazing on. But we do, and you'll see on one of the videos that we do have to hay some of those paddocks.
How many months out of the year can you graze?
No. Very few. So with the cell grazing, we have been able to increase the length of time that we can keep them on pasture by almost a month. We used to have to start feeding in September. We plan to feed hay in October. So October, November, December, January, February, March, and most of April. At least 7 months of the year, we're feeding hay.
How many acres do you have?
So we own about 40 acres in Plainfield and 178 in Greensboro Bend. I know those are tiny numbers for out here and in the west. We're selling the farm in Greensboro Bend. That's going to what's called the Vermont Land Trust, which ensures that it will still be in farming. And we will consolidate everything to those 40 acres in Plainfield. Again, we don't hay those, so we do hay other fields. Right now, we're managing about 400 acres between what we own and what we hay.
How do you feed the bales? At home, or you're giving it rain?
How do you feed the hay, Ray?
Very carefully.
You unroll it?
No, I don't unroll it. We had feeders, and the feeders that we use, we build. They're made out of 6x6 hemlock. That way, cattle are not getting tangled up in with their horns. And I do scatter a little bit. We got a lot of animals coming to eat, so they all, the different age animals, different sizes. I do put some outside the feeder, so there is cattle that stay back and don't come and eat as quick as the other ones, or aren't able to. So they can start eating. But I don't unroll bales. Not that I haven't before. If we get a bale that's not happened to it, got a hole in the plastic, when we made it, it's got a bad spot in it, I will take that out and put it on the hillside and let it roll out. If they eat it, they eat it. If they don't, it goes in the manure pot. It's the same with the bales I put in the feeder. If they don't eat that bale in 2 days, when you got 30 animals in a paddock and they feed it, and they don't eat it, or they don't want it, that goes in the manure pot. I do not force cattle to eat something they don't want to eat. We lose, they lose, everybody loses. And the other thing is, when our cattle are in the paddocks and stuff, when people talk about 4 strands, how many strands of barbed wire, how many strands of this. We use 1 strand of electric fence, and most of it you can step over. My dad always said, the best fence in the world is a full summer. If cattle aren't hungry, if they got shade, they got water, they really don't need to go anywhere. So you may have a bull once in a while that says, I'm going to go over to the paddock if I think somebody needs me over there. That may happen, but not very often. And people come to the barn, and they go up to the barn or pasture to see the cattle, and they step off the lawn. There's a strand of wire there, and they step over it to go see the cattle. People cannot believe that we can do that. But it's all because the best vets in the world. And I also, Jane wants to shut up. But I gotta teach her to hold this microphone up to her mouth like this, so everybody can hear her. But I keep waving at her over here like that. So, we wouldn't be doing all this, the rotational grazing, or all this stuff, if it wasn't for Janet Stewart. She has worked unbelievable. She does emails. I've sent 1 email in my life. Janet was on the phone telling me how to do it, but she don't drive tractors.
I don't think he's right about the bull. We can't get the bull to go across the fence. I don't know that we've ever had the bull go into a pasture he's not supposed to. But like I said, I won't say they never ever get out. But I tell people that we fence train the calves. I like to have our calves born in the barn. I know everybody can't do that. I like them born in the barn so I can watch them. I can see if they're nursing. We'll talk about that this afternoon. When they're ready to go outside, Ray puts a halter on the calf. We put a 30-foot leash on that. We have a double strand around a small area of the barn. The calf goes out. It's been in the barn for probably a week, and it says, I have legs. I can run. And it takes right off, and the first thing it does is hit the fence. It's taken us a long time. I wanted to start by saying this morning, we are still learning all the time. We learn from everybody. We learn because something didn't work. How can we do it differently? How can we do it better? This new calf training has been we've probably been doing it about 2 years. When that calf hits that fence and says blah, he's on a rope. Ray pulls it back. Instead of the instinct to go through that fence because he wants to get away from it, we don't have to say anymore, calf's out, what do we do? Shut the fence off. The calf gets pulled back on the rope. The calf tries it again, says, here I go, I'm gonna run, hits the fence again. Ah! Usually takes 3 times. They never touch the fence again. If we had Angus, they'd walk up to that fence and say, I wonder if that's hot, I should try that. The Highlands say, I did that, I don't need to do that again. So, I think that's one of the reasons they don't go out. They're smart. You all know Highlands are smarter than any other breed. Okay, so, in terms of the feeding, and in terms of what we do, Ray said we couldn't do this without me. I couldn't do this without him. I worry every single day. What would I do if something happens to Ray? He worries every single day. What will I do if something happens to Jim? We're lucky we have very different skill sets, but in some ways that is not helpful because we don't have a real backup system. So we're working on trying to find a backup so that we have somebody who knows what each of us does. So I'm going to show you some videos that illustrate what we've been talking about. So here you see animals in Greensboro Bend. This is our bigger farm. And you can see them coming down because Ray's calling them. They're going to go in a new cell. That's a crossbred right there. On this farm, you're going to see a shorthorn bull coming. These are mostly Highland mamas with a shorthorn bull producing our beef.
With your shorthorn bull, are you producing horns?
Good question. He is told we are not producing horns, hopefully. With the shorthorn bull on the Highland mama, we get about 80% naturally polled. The others might have skirts or they might have short horns, but they're never going to have horns big enough, so when they go to the slaughterhouse, they say no thank you. This is cattle going into a paddock in Plainfield. Again, it's going to depend on the time of year. This is a spring pasture. You can see how lush it is. It's almost too tall. This probably should have been hay, but there's plenty of grass there. They don't run, they don't hurry, they walk, they know they're going to a new paddock, and you can see what they do. They put their heads down, and what do they start to do? They eat. They weren't hungry, they just came out of the paddock to feed. But they put their heads down, and they start to eat. They may not eat that long, they may eat for a while and lay down, and then eat again. But that's what they do. And for cattle, you probably all know this, they've got to sweep the grass into their mouth with their tongue. They don't nibble grass, and so if the grass is so short that they can't sweep it with their tongue, they're not getting enough nutrition. These are all registered cows and calves. There's a shorthorn cross right there.
So have you found any difference between like a 3/4 shorthorn, quarter Highland as opposed to a 50-50 in the texture?
Not in the beef. They will grow even a little bit faster, the 3/4, but the beef is exactly the same.
I have a question from the live stream. She wants to know, she wants me to list the materials list. I'm sorry, the materials list that you quoted that you purchased for for creating the cells. I don't know if I have that. Is that?
Probably, I didn't get it. One second, I didn't look at it.
She also had another question earlier that I missed about when you say you're 100% grass fed, do you feed range cubes at all?
No.
You do not feed range
We
cubes?
do not feed range cubes.
Okay.
We don't feed treats. And again, different people do different things. I want the treat for that animal to be contact with us. The cone is our treat. I don't want animals in my face that when I walk in the pasture, they think I'm gonna have food. We do feed treats to our Highland steers that we are using for agritourism. They can feed them apples, they feed them carrots, but we do not feed range crews. Everything is our grass and our hay.
Can you, maybe, I don't know, I can take a picture and post it, or the material, or whatever she was saying?
So here we go. We ordered 400 4-foot fiberglass posts, 8,000 feet of speed woven wire fencing, 400 yellow insulators, and 20 gate handles.
Start over and talk in the mic.
Okay, so 400 4-foot fiberglass posts, 8,000 feet of speed woven wire fencing, 400 yellow insulators, and 20 gate handles. And that gave us 16 cells. We now have 16 bags.
You saying it's a woven fence?
It's that wire speed fence.
It's a single line.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's one.
Polywater. Yeah, yes, polywater. We are careful with that because we actually, and if you've looked at my Facebook post, by the way, that's my contact information. Email me, go to the website, Facebook. I usually put everything about cows up on either my page, Greenfield Highland Beef, Highland House Farms Day. If you've looked at my Facebook page, I just did a recent post about a cow named Brooklyn. Brooklyn got caught in speed fence. We were at the farmer's market. On our way home, we got a call that said one of your cows is tangled in speed fence. The fence was hot. She must have kept kicking to get away from it. It severed a tendon in her leg, above the foot. The foot totally flopped back and forth. We were sick about it. Called the vet said, get her up to the barn. I can't repair that tendon. I'm gonna cast that leg. We'll leave the cast on for 3 weeks. You're gonna have to change a bandage every 2 weeks for 5 months. My hope is that the scar tissue will fill in that gap and will be the support for that leg. She'll never have a tendon again in that back leg. Costs a lot of money, a lot of time. Brooklyn has a beautiful, beautiful calf this year. This is her second. I tell people, good vets walk on water, that whatever they tell you it costs, it's worth it. Every vet visit that comes, they get a package of ground beef for them and their tech, because I want them to come when we need them. Again, we're lucky. The vet comes right to us. I know many people don't have that luxury where you have to load an animal, take it to the vet. I can't imagine when you've got an animal suffering or some kind of a stressful situation, have to do that. My hats are off to all of them that have to do that. Our vet lives 20 minutes from us. I taught him in first grade. They come when we call, and we're very, very lucky. But, so I am careful with that woven wire because we try to keep it taut so that they don't get caught in it. We learn the lesson. Again, we're learning all the time. That was not a cheap lesson, but it came out okay. So here you see we are haying a paddock. This is grass that got away from us in the spring. There was more grass than we could rotate the animals into. It was better off to cut it, hay it, and have new growth for them. You can be sure I'm not driving like that train. We don't have fancy equipment. We usually have really small fields. It's not like out here. Our fields are maybe 10, 12 acres. So we don't have really more equipment. No, Ray just mows in the paddock, and we don't move the fences. Again, if you have temporary fencing, you can move that, but ours are semi-permanent, and we just leave them there. They're gonna eat under that fence anyway. All right, so you can see some of the posts, and you can see some of the cells in these pictures. We bring the door. This is in the fall, so this is after I've taken them out of the paddock. Yeah, good question. You can see the fiberglass posts and the speed fencing. It's pretty low technology in her. Probably, Ray would think it was easier if we did take down the fence post because it's kind of a pain to have to go around and do that with the post there, but it works. And you can see right there, I think there's 8 cells. There are 8 cells right there in that part. And they aren't very big. So how many? This is going to be wood ash. We use recycled wood ash from power plants. They bring a spreader. They dump a pile. And Ray can spread 30 tons in one day. About 30 tons in a day. And it has tons of minerals and nutrition in it, more than mine does.
I'm gonna take over for a second here. Something I'm gonna go back on about feeding the cattle in their feeders. I use the tractor to put it in. I also use the tractor to move them feeders. I got a couple grab hooks on the front of the bucket or the tractor. I lower it down, got short chains, go around the feeder on the 6x6, pick the feeder right up and I put it where I want to. Also, the stuff I'm spreading there, basically a lot of it came from around the feeders. I scrape it out and I let it wane. We don't spread it right off with the hay and stuff in it, the old hay. We let it break down, then put it back on the fields. It saves so much more. It's such a big difference in what you put it produces for grasses. So anyways, I'll get us back to Janet.
So this is commercial fertilizer. We rarely use this. It's expensive. We don't like to use commercial fertilizer on our soil, but we have some very steep hills that are too steep for spreading the north, too steep for the north spreader, too steep for the ash. This thing with the flotation tires, you can just spread a whole field in about an hour. So we do have some that we put commercial fertilizer on. I think we do maybe one field every other year that we'll put commercial fertilizer. And I generally write grants. I don't know if you have grants here, but in Vermont, you can write, and there's a couple of organizations, FACT and AFT, that will give grants for improving the soil. So when we get the wood ash, I usually have a grant for that by FACT.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So she wants to know if she says transmitter, I'm assuming your hot wire for your, yeah, that, if it's solar or if it's hardwired. And if it's solar, what brand?
Okay, both. At the house, those pastures where you saw Ray spreading, that's on our land in Plainfield. We have a electric fencer that's in the garage that does all of the fence there. On some of the pastures that we use, we don't have an electric fencer and we use a solar fencer. I can't tell you what it is.
Two recommendations, Gallagher and Parmack.
She said she has a
The Gallagher is
Patriot.
the one that we use for plugging in, but I don't know the brand of the solar.
She said she has a Patriot solar and she's had trouble with it, so.
It's not a Patriot.
Okay.
Spend the money on a Parmack if you're gonna go solar.
That's what I have. Thank you. It's a Parmack solar fencer. That's what we use.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't catch what you said about how you handle water.
How do we handle watering?
Do you have permanent water instead of each paddock, or do you move them around?
So remember I said that the state of Vermont wants to exclude cattle from surface water? They gave us a grant to put in Ritchie frost-free waterers. We have 3 Ritchie waterers, 1 on each side of the barn in Plainfield and 3 in Greensboro. So the different groups, I have 2 groups. One group comes to one side of the barn, it's a double Ritchie. One group comes to the other side. They have an underground water line, they have a thermostat, and they stay perfect. We have never had a problem with them. Until we put them in, I told you that I can push the lever on the wrapper. I can also run a sledgehammer. I spent most of my winters hooked to a sledgehammer breaking ice in water tubs. And I'll tell you, the best way to have water is for them to have free access. You may not have to have frost-free waterers, but when I was breaking tubs with a sledgehammer, they would all be there all at once, aside from the fact that I'm in the middle of all those horns who are thirsty and want water. The bigger animals got water. Some of the smaller animals or the calves, by the time they got there, that water was already freezing over. And they only drank when I brought up the sledgehammer and put the water in the tub. Right now, one might come at 2 o'clock in the morning, one might come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. One might drink 3 times a day, one might drink 2 times a day. But you know what? It's like people. If you're thirsty, you're not eating. And so they're eating better and they're healthier with having that free access to the water. That's what we do for water. We do in the barn, we have a couple of animals like little mini calves. Those are still in a tub. I still water those in a tub. Or we have a frost-free hydrant for those. It goes back down into the ground and then the hose drains out.
Have you tried the freeze miser in your Vermont climate yet?
Have we tried what?
Freeze miser.
I don't know what that is.
So it's a device that goes on if you have a flow water, and what it does is it's got a piece of clay in there, and as it gets cold, it starts, that clay restricts, and then it allows the water to flow. Now, it can overflow, so if you don't want to have mud, you need to put a small drain system so the cows aren't there. But we've had a negative 25 wind chill, and it's been that frozen. And this winter, we had 1 tank that we did not put a heater in. The breaking of the ice, I still had to do that occasionally. It took me just a few little taps, and the water was open. And as long as there was sunshine, it would stay open all day. I don't have to break first thing in the morning.
We have never used one of those. We went right to the Ritchie waterers, and we have been incredibly happy with them. We set the thermostat, and we've never had anything freeze, and we've never had them run over. Any other questions? Okay, I think that, let me just make sure I got everything covered here.
That's what I need to remember.
Oh, yeah. Okay, on your page, there, on your table, that's what we're doing. There's a packet of maps. And those are the maps that I used when I started designing my rotational cells. I can tell you I have many, many drafts of how to do this. Because sometimes when you think it's going to look right, you go out into the field and it doesn't work. Or you set it up and the access to the sacrifice package didn't work. Or the alleyway that we built wasn't wide enough for them to come into. What I want you to do on your paper is first think about your groups of animals. Think about your land. You're going to need to have some of these overhead maps when you really do it. But I want you to just think about how you might design an intensive cell grazing system for your animals with your land. Think about water, shade, access to whatever, where there's minerals, where you want to take a few minutes to do that. That packet is just how I did it and what we now use at our Plainfield farm for the packets. Again, in Vermont, they will pay us to do rotational grazing. It's not a lot. It's $25 per acre of any land that you set up in these intensive cells because it decreases runoff and it's better for the soil and it's better for the ground. So, we're almost done. We're going to have more time for questions later on after the banquet and maybe when we do this workshop this afternoon. But I want you to think before you go to lunch about how you quite get this kind of self-raising, because I'm telling you, regardless of what kind of grass you have, your drought, whatever, it's going to improve your amount and quality of the feed for your animals. And it will delay the time that you have to feed hay.
Okay, now, I think they're pretty well set up to eat. Gotta go out this door, then go back around and go back to the doorway into the next room. Somebody missing what? So,
We'll be back here.
just have to get in line and,
We'll be back here at 1:30 sharp.
we'll be back at 1:30 sharp. So we got about an hour.